Hey, what's going on, guys, in the Jasper Nation? Darby here. Today, I am joined with Tim Culp. Tim Culp is a dark fantasy, horror, and tech writer. He likes to write stories about magic, mythology, and technology. When not writing fiction, Tim is writing, um, presents information about AI, artificial intelligence, and the changing workforce. And so we're going to be kind of doing a deep dive conversation here on AI, the human, and then the robot in mind, and all the different use cases we're seeing in the workforce, as well as active recipes that we're building inside of the AI author community. I know Tim's got a lot to share. I'm super excited to have you here today, Tim. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and who you are, what you do, and how you even maybe got into Jasper in the first place?
Yeah, thanks, Darby. It's super awesome to be here. Thank you for having me. I've loved writing for many, many years. I've been a storyteller. I'm like a big Dungeons and Dragons nerd too. We were talking about before we started recording. Totally a Dungeons and Dragons person since I was like in middle school. So storytelling has been a thing for me my entire life, pretty much. When I started being a developer, getting into the professional world, I was like, okay, I'll focus on writing the nonfiction to build out my personal brand and build out I'm not like other developers. I write these other articles and things like that. And it was awesome. And it has been a great thing for me career-wise. With the company I'm with right now is Mind Over Machines. We do a lot and we talk a lot about AI and humans and what is the relationship between AI and humans. And we work with customers implement automation systems. And one of the questions that come up is, well, what does this mean for my job? Like if this automation system can process X number of invoices, what am I doing with that spare time? And so it's been interesting having those conversations and navigating these discussions around human empowerment and things like that. And then I come home and I'm like, okay, I got to type out all these words for this story and really work on this story. We hit a massive time crunch where I had to produce some nonfiction articles on the timeline. And I'm like, oh man, I need to go faster. How do I go faster? And I don't even remember how I stumbled onto Jasper, but I found that and I was like, oh, this is perfect. Yeah, we help companies implement AI systems. Here's an AI system to help me write faster. Started working with nonfiction content and was just like, whoa, that is super fast. And my nonfiction workflow was, I have the idea for the article, crank it out, work with Jasper to challenge my ideas and see, well, where does Jasper take me in some of these topics? So, because there might be something I wasn't thinking about. And then working with, a editor that we work with here in my team who goes in, does the fact checking, does the linked articles, for the social proof and all that good stuff. Well, this was going very well. And, I've been doing a lot of fiction writing lately. And so I said, well, how can I use Jasper for this fiction writing aspect? And really started exploring storytelling with Jasper and started with some very flash fiction type of stories on my blog, which I found very interesting. There were things that were coming up that Jasper was just going in this totally other direction. And I'm like, cool, let's go see where we go with that. I'd say from a creative standpoint, that's one thing that I just find so useful about the tool is that there are things that pop up. A story I was writing about these kids who were running away from this haunted house, and Jasper wrote a line where they ran into a police car. I'm like, well, that actually makes sense. They are cutting school, they run into a police car, now what happens? Introduces a whole new character to the story, introduces a whole scenario. So using Jasper as an experiment, some interesting stuff. But that's when I wanted to say, well, what can we do around poetry? How can we push the boundaries of this? And so the idea came up about having Jasper write a series of poems about climate change. I thought it would be interesting to get an AI perspective on humans' relationship to nature. And so started experimenting with Jasper to do that and produced a book called Monsters Dance to Twilight, and was very surprised at the outcome and been sharing it with the AI author community. And what you guys are doing with that, Darby, is so awesome. So, I think that's the high level. I'm a techie, but my background's actually in liberal arts, religious studies and philosophy, and art history. So, I look at the human relationship with everything. So Jasper and how it works with writing, Super cool stuff.
And I think it's really interesting having, especially from like your company's perspective, and like just, all of us are coming into this AI writing industry from different perspectives, and different backgrounds and different paths essentially that got us here. And you mentioned like once the AI machines take over certain jobs and automations, like then what do I do with my spare time? Something that immediately comes to mind for me is like, okay, do something that's more productive and like a higher, more valuable use of your time. But I don't know if that's necessarily like the conclusion that everybody makes. Some people just say like the machines are taking over, I'm not going to have anything to do. But like, I'm curious kind of your take on like where you see that versus like all of like from your knowledge and working with AI for so many years, like what are maybe some ways that you were seeing people not like let AI take away their job in the industry, but now they make the pivot, just like so many people are making the pivot into harnessing this technology for better use. Like maybe what are some examples that you see people using AI to just like level up their income rather than let it kind of take things away from them?
Inevitably, when we talk to people about this, they're like, when we say, well, what do you do? Like, what's your job? Oh, well, I do X. Okay. What does that mean? Like, you process, and I'll use like some common business examples. You process inventory. You are working with invoices. You are working with medical claims. You are working with whatever. It's a very manual process that can be automated normally. When we ask people to tell us about, like, show us what you're doing, let's dig into the work that you're doing, most people really don't think about the work they're doing. They just do it. Like, they don't really analyze, what am I doing? Where's the value I'm bringing to the job versus just clicking the clickies, and going forward from there. So when we take a step back and say, okay, well, if you don't have to click the clickies, do all the buttons and stuff like that, well, what else would you be doing? And just starting with that kind of a conversation. So if you didn't have to write your social media ads for your books, that you've released books and you want to do Facebook ads, if you didn't have to write those ads, what would you do with that time? And as a writer, dude, it's obvious. I'd write. Like, I would be creating the storylines, creating characters, thinking through the different worlds, maybe exploring new, platforms and medias. Like Kindle Vella has been on my mind. Like, what can we do in Kindle Vella? So when people are looking at, where does AI collide? The question that they need to also ask is, what's the thing, the magic I'm bringing to this work? And everybody is bringing some kind of human magic to their work. What is it, and how do I amplify it? So if you're going to be working with automations for claims processing, again, mundane example here, claims processing, well, if there's some kind of automation doing that, somebody's got to manage that automation. Like, it's not just set it and forget it. You've got to care and feed and manage. Well, you talk about future skills, being able to put on your resume, manage digital assistants for claims processing. Well, okay, wait a minute. The other 5 people who just applied this job don't have that. What is this? So working with the digital workforce, that's going to be a huge differentiator in the future for people's jobs, whether you're a writer or you're, processing claims or you're doing anything. The ability to work with these automations is a huge level up to your career.
Yeah, I think so. And it's reminding me right now of, a conversation I had just this very recently last week with a mentor who we were discussing kind of like what's the power of like really using Jasper? Like, what are we really like selling, right? If we're selling anything here, what are we selling? Is it being a better writer? In a lot of cases, yes, it is, right? Like, we're being a better writer, like in general, writing stuff faster. But if your quality sucks, then like it's not going to make you a better writer. Like, it hurt your reputation by putting out worse level quality. Just because you're doing volume doesn't mean that everything is going to be that much better because you can do it that much faster.
Right.
And he introduced me to the idea of, you're not helping people become a better writer. You're helping people transition from being just a writer to being a logician.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, what is a logician? Like, we're thinking about what are the most logical questions that we can input, and like the things that we can put in that most logically make sense to the machine, that by putting those proper logistical inputs in, the outputs are going to result in enhancing their creativity the creative element because the thought has gone through. And that's what boss mode is at the end of the day. That's what commands are. That's what recipes are. And that's what the systems that this AI has been trained to think by. And so it's almost like, no, like, don't think like I need to like let Jasper write for me. He's like, no, you need to think like the logician behind the process. That's where the magic's at, and relaying that logic between the AI. And like, ultimately, I think that's what like AI author really is at the end of the day in your conversations with Jasper. So like, it just brings me back to like the creative aspect of it, because you kind of stumbled upon Jasper in a way that was a necessity because you had a ton of nonfiction articles to write. Like, how do I write this much stuff here? Oh, holy cow, Jasper can do like nonfiction. Like, great. Like, you kind of expect it.
Right.
But then you go to the round of like writing fiction stories, writing haikus, writing all this sort of stuff. I'd love to see kind of your process. I know you've got, like, I think you've got Jasper pulled up on your side. So I'd love to kind of like see your process with how do you interact with Jasper? Like, how does this look in action to develop fictional poetry?
In Jasper here, when I started thinking about poetry and writing out the concept of like, okay, let's have some haiku poetry, or let's have poetry. Could Jasper even do it? It's like could this even be done? And so where I wanted to start with was, okay, well, I know highly structured content works in AI systems in general. And so what are some formats that are highly structured? And haiku came to mind, especially as I was thinking about topic of climate change. Haikus are often about, environment and nature. So I thought it would be a good setup. So, when I come into Jasper, the first thing I usually do, I don't always have a title when I start, like, because creative writing, I don't know, we're going to see what comes out. But I do start with thinking about how I've worked with ghostwriters in the past, where I tell them like, okay, here's what I want you to write about. And then, we kind of iterate back and forth there. So, in this particular case, I start high level. I'm writing haiku poems. And again, why haiku? Because it's highly structured, and I'm going to be able to give very explicit directions on how to build this. And then I start thinking about theme. In this case, let's be a little bit more cheery than climate change. We'll write about the beauty of nature in different seasons. And again, thinking about writing to market needs to come into play here, right? Because again, we talked about this is a business. Like, we're writing not just to express ourselves, but to actually, to impact somebody, to care. If I just want to write a story, just throw it on my blog for free, So I want somebody to be able to say, I want this. I will spend money for this. And that goes for any service, what's the value to the person? So who are we writing this for? So this book is for people who, and I have some notes on this screen up here. So meditate on the change of seasons. Okay, so it's kind of a meditative, relaxing kind of thing that we're going for here. When I'm thinking about the tone of voice, I want it to match the story. So the R.L. Stine masterclass, masterclass.com, if you have not watched that, is so good. He talks about theme and making sure that you communicate the story in the first few pages. Nobody, like, if you read a Goosebumps book, you got it. Like, chapter 1, you know what's going on. So here, I'm going to go with serene as the tone of voice, because that is the theme that I want generated. Another good example of this is Save the Cat, which I know you guys had just released a great recipe for that. The theme stated is in the first few pages of the book. You want people to know what they're getting into. And then that's where I start. Like, okay, I'm sketching, because again, I'm not trying to, as Zachariah says, the Magna Carta, I'm not trying to produce this great work here. I'm trying to get to my first draft. I'm trying to get to a sketch quickly. And so from here, I would go through and say, write 5 haiku about springtime. And then executing our command.
Execution there was the Command Shift Enter.
Yep. I'm on a PC, so Control Enter for me. So that's the going through and keeping that here. And so here we go. The beauty of the world is shown in the change of seasons. Springtime is in bloom. Pretty good for just popping out of Jasper. But now for it to be haiku, depending on your school of thought, you have a syllable count, 5, 7, 5. And so we want to look here. And again, this is also where I come into, what's it, syllable, oops, syllable counter. I should have had that pulled up. Yep, syllablecounter.net. Although have multiple references. So in Monsters Dance to Twilight, at the end of the book, I reference the tools that I use to create the book, and go through multiple syllable counters because you can actually count syllables different ways. So what I would do here is you could manually count them, but just from here's how this works. Drop it in here and pop out, see how many we get. As I said, haiku, you should have a 5, 7, 5, but you want short, long, short, and you want the shorts to match in the syllable count. So technically this could work. But again, this is the first draft. So now I can come back and say, okay, well, how do I want to shift this around? So I've got, 6 syllables here. I got 8 syllables here, 6 syllables here. Maybe I want to rephrase what words I'm using, use different words. One of the things that I really like, you were talking about the logician and thinking about what else can I do here. I really like using tools like rephrase and say, what else can we get here? And be able to see what are the other things and just quickly iterate through. What else do I got? The other thing, when I do fiction writing for like middle grade, like if I'm working on middle grade type stories or elementary type stories, the write it for a 5-year-old or explain it to a 5th grader, that's phenomenal because that helps me quickly get right on grade level with what I'm trying to communicate. So that's where I'd start on this very simply. And haiku is a pretty good one. And then just here, Control J to get Jasper to keep writing and see what we get. So once it runs out, it basically just stops and it will kind of give you the thumbs up, thumbs down to see what you're getting. So what I would also do from here is, and what I was working on was explaining the syllable count that I want, using a 5, 7, 5 syllable structure.
So comment on that real quick is like how that 1575 in there, like the impact that can have on the command, like these little intricate one word can totally change the output.
Yeah,
quality.
Yeah, absolutely. And in what I found is with this level of direction, it is hit or miss, but it is hit much more than it is miss. So it is definitely a good area for experimentation. So here off the bat, that to me, I'm like, I think we missed on this one, but that's okay because I like what is coming out here. So 777. But again, this gets easy. Fresh, comma, new. Now we got our 5 syllables. But again, I only had to take out 2 words from what Jasper created, and I've got some good stuff here. Then once I knew from a story perspective, oh, Jasper can do this, then I started injecting, okay, well, what's the actual story I want to tell? And using the commands to direct the story. So write 5 haiku about a person walking through a garden in spring. So now I'm being much more explicit of, okay, here's the story that's shaping up in my mind. Maybe it's somebody who's walking through a garden, kind of reflecting on life and, be able to go from there. Control Shift Enter. to be able to get through and be able to see what we're getting as our output and say, okay, how do I want to shape this up as a story? And then just iterating through, like, oh, no, I don't like that. Let me update that. Let me get more specific here, less specific here. And there's other phrases that you can use in your command around what syllable counts you want, what structures you want. You can direct it to on the first line content. So it's pretty flexible with what you can do here.
Is that like common when it comes to like a book made with haikus, or just for like my ignorance on the subject is it a one haiku at the beginning leads to a totally different one at the end, or is it kind of like free for all? You just decide these are not going to be related, or they're going to be around a theme of like winter, spring, like
they're usually about a theme. And so
okay.
we were talking about KDP Rocket in the AI author workshops. And so again, one of the not to be a commercial for KDP Rocket, but it is a powerful tool to say, okay, I'm writing haikus. I'm planning on writing a haiku book. What is out there? And you can go and see, like, pull up the category of, Japanese poetry and haiku, and you see, what all the different ratings are. You can see all the different books in that category and be able to see what themes stand out. A good example for poetry books is there are a lot of poetry books about nature. As I was thinking about a book on climate change and saying, well, I'm going to actually take more of a horror story perspective on it. Now we're doing something very different from your average poetry book. That is not, horror poetry is a thing, but usually not in a haiku format.
Right. Yeah. No, it's interesting. Like, I'm trying to think of what's the word when you take like one thing from a totally different industry and smash it with, something like, I don't know, like divergent thinking or something along those lines. But it's Jasper will pick up on some crazy stuff.
Right. And it was, it did not take a heavy lift. And if I go back here to the sketchbook, when this is the actual sketchbook to write out the book, this is directly in the book. That it was what came out of what we're doing here. And I should have saved the commands here, sorry, but the command was along the lines of, write 20 haiku where nature is being attacked by people and nature is afraid. I think I even said horror haiku, and it pumped out some really good stuff. And then as I got through, I said, okay, well, let me actually flip the story. And so in the book, it is actually, the book flips to tell the other side of the story from a design perspective. And what's people's perspective? They're just kind of going along with life, and all of a sudden resources are drying up and animals are getting kind of crazy and diseases are happening. And it also let me experiment with, originally, I wanted to write a post of like, well, what can we do? Like, what are some of the things that we can do to help? And I had a third section of the book that was about like, oh, everything will be okay. But then again, using the writing process, I have an initial reader. If you haven't read Stephen King's On Writing, I recommend everybody read that book. It's phenomenally good. But he talks about the initial reader. And my initial reader read the everything's going to work out, and read the post about like, here's what you need to do. And she's like, cut all that. She's like, we know everything you're saying here is the same thing we've heard since we were in middle school of how to take care of the environment. People aren't doing it. And the cheery ending, she's like, it doesn't land this solid. So even using Jasper, still keeping your creative process where you're getting that human feedback loop, super critical. But Jasper lets you iterate to it faster.
Anytime you try to avoid anyone else's perspective and just do this stuff on your head and doing the story, but no one's ever read it, and by the time it gets out, it's like, what have you been spending all this time on if people don't even like the story in the first place, which is partly why we encourage the minimum viable book process first. It's like, look, if you write it for one person and want that impact to hit, if it's not going to land for your ideal person, you might want to find that out sooner than later, rather than spend a year putting this book together and writing different versions of it. Got to have that that feedback, especially from people that like are willing to give you the direct feedback too, right? And having that closer circle. So how did you come across like your editor, like type person, the person that you trust with this stuff?
So my initial reader is my wife, and she has no problem
Mm.
telling me when something's terrible. The way I always phrase it is, I look to you to tell me if I'm about to walk out and look like an idiot, and so she takes care of me like that. But she's been my initial reader since my nonfiction stuff all the way to all the fiction stuff that I've been working on lately. From editors and all those things, readsy.com, man, that's the way to go. It's you go in, you got your marketplace there. What I have found is when you start, so I'm currently working on book number 8 in my development process. I have 2 books out, one on pre-order, and more coming. So when I started with Readsy, it was like throwing whatever we could see, who's the best person for me? Because there's great editors out there, but who's the editor for you? And so take some time, be gentle with yourself as you're working with these people. Like, give yourself some grace of, okay, you're learning. Maybe they didn't do a good job in it, or they did a great job and you didn't recognize it. Like, so Readsy is a really good platform to find talent and leverage it to go forward.
Any recommendations on like type of posts to qualify editors for yourself? Because obviously like someone that's only edits like romance and you're doing like action, horror, fiction stuff, like maybe there's not going to be the best fit there. Like, do you have sort of like a process that you developed to vet people that are going to be applying through there? Because I imagine it's similar to like a platform like Upwork, where you put something out and then have people submit applications or like responses to invitation.
Yeah, so Readsy's pretty slick. So you create the job, just like Upwork. Unlike Upwork, it doesn't just go out as a blast to everybody. You actually invite people you want to work with. And so you can go and look at their profile, see if they're a fit. I think you can do like 5 people at a time, to invite per request. As people decline, or you are like, never mind, that's not right, you can pull in another person. So the key in my mind is writing a very, very clear request and doing your homework. Readsy does list what other books these people have worked on. And so if you've done your research, going back to what you had said yesterday in our sessions on the AI author group, do your research. What are your comp titles? Who's your competition? Go find people who worked on those books and then say, hey, can you come work on my book? It helps you make sure you're on the right target and right audience. And in your request, be hyper specific. This is a horror book for middle grade children, or this is a horror book for adults who like the following kinds of stories. Niche down, niche down. Don't try to write for everybody. Know your audience, target your audience, tell everybody who your audience is.
I think that's sound advice across the board. And, niching down and just being specific with Jasper at the same point. It's like the more specific and direct, and this is what I want, better of a chance you're going to find that outcome. And obviously, if it's your first time hiring anybody in an editor in a freelance place, or it's your first time using Jasper, give yourself some grace, like you said. This is really a journey, and like trusting the process and being, a participant in the game. My take is that there is no end to it. There's no end destination. Aside from us all dying eventually one day. And so it's, how can we create and how can we adapt and innovate on the processes that we're all a part of? And that's why I think the community and collaboration that, that we're building at the AI author, members like you, everyone going through the summer challenge that's going on right now. It's huge just to know that we're out there and we're supportive of each other. And, especially with, the collaboration that we're going to see more and more in the future with AI technology, the human mind, how do we level up in, our existence and our, relationship with these AI machines? How do we use that to enhance what we're doing on a day-to-day basis, add more value than take away? Then I think the people that are going to win out of it are the people that are going to be open to the collaboration and use it to step into their own right of their own zone of genius,
Yeah.
and what really lights them up. And so excited to see what that future kind of holds with it, and kind of new stuff that you keep coming up with on your end, using it. Love seeing your posts inside of the community. And I know it's helpful for many of the other members as well. So super appreciate your time here. So I want to thank you again, Tim, for kind of walking us through your story, your perspective, and your process for, kind of approaching Jasper. I think it's really cool. And any kind of like parting words you'd like to leave us with? Where can people go to find out more about you as an author, you as your alter ego author,
Yeah.
and otherwise? Yeah.
Parting words is really reflect on what's the human value you bring to your work. AI is a lot of people are like, oh, well, that's in the future. No, it's now. Like it is now here, impacting everybody now. So what's the human element you bring to your work, and highlight that, amplify it. And so keeping up with me, I'm on timculp.com. You can come and check out what's going on there from an author perspective. On Amazon, the book that we've been talking about is called Monsters Dance to Twilight. It's by Cy Borgman, who is my AI author brand. So that separating that out, lots of great opportunities to think about your human plus machine, alter ego as you are talking into the community. So timculp.com, see what we got going on there.
Right on. And until next time, guys, make sure that you are liking and subscribing to the AI Author on YouTube. And we'd love to have you join us inside the AI Author community. If you're looking for ways to use AI, we use Jasper. We love Jasper. We train on Jasper. That is about as advanced as we can get, with us learning every single day ourselves, and what the content we develop. So if you want kind of more behind the scenes, access to all of our premium recipes as soon as they're available, and to connect with a like-minded community of AI authors that are using Jasper to really pioneer the future of publishing with artificial intelligence, love to have you join us at the AIauthor.com. Subscribe today. And until next time, take care, stay safe, and we'll see you on the other side.
Thank you.